Well, Isaiah 5 and chapter 6 is what I'm hoping to get through tonight. Isaiah 5 and 6, again, just a little bit of background, a little bit of context for us. I spent quite a bit of time that first week, and if you're not here, I encourage you to maybe check that out on the app or online or whatever. But Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah is one of the biggies when it comes to the prophets, not just because of the length of the volume of the book that he has for us, but in the depth as well of the message that he wants to share to us and that he had for the nation and the time that he lived in. And again, he lived long after the nation had split. You know, there was first Saul and then David and then Solomon under a united kingdom. But after Solomon, Rehoboam and Jeroboam split ways, and the north 10 tribes formed what we call the nation of Israel. The southern two adopted the name of Judah. But in the north, in Israel, they had 19 kings that were throughout their history, but every single one of them was bad. And so if you're reading through like Kings and Chronicles and you're wondering like, okay, this king's good, this king's bad, if it ever mentions that a king is good, it's a king from the southern kingdom. Every single one in the north is bad, every single time. But after the split, the southern kingdom, and after the northern kingdom was taken away into captivity, the southern kingdom continued for about 150 years, and throughout their history, they had about 20 kings. And as I said, as far as the kings in the southern kingdom, it was kind of a mixed bag. Some of them were good, some of them were not so good, some were terrible, some were very good. And Isaiah's message, as we read all the way back in chapter 1, right from the get-go, his message is for the southern kingdom. It's for Judah, it's for Jerusalem, and it's a warning to not follow down the footsteps of what Israel did. He's almost using them as a walking, talking, living example. It's like, look at your sister country in the north, look what's going on, and they're getting wiped out, and don't let that happen to you. Now, it was the Assyrians that took away the northern kingdom, and Judah would be able to withstand the Assyrians when they come, with some help from the Lord, obviously. When he kills 185,000 people in one night, that really helps for you. But beyond that, Babylon, the nation of Babylon, is going to come shortly after Isaiah's life and take them into captivity. And one more other thing that I want to point out that we've seen here and there, and not even so much tonight necessarily, but we've already seen this, is that, you know, here's Isaiah living 2,700 years ago, and he is looking into the future, and so he's prophesying. He's saying this thing is going to happen in the future. And much like if you're looking off into the distance, you can see two mountain peaks, and it's hard to tell, like, how far away is this one and how far away is that one. And so there's things that he talks about that are going to take place in the future, and some of them are much closer to his time, to his locality, than other ones. Some of them are still in our future. You know, he's going to talk about Babylon coming and the destruction that awaits, and so that's true of this, but it's also true in a grander way of what he calls over and over in the book, the day of the Lord, you know, the tribulation, when God pours out his wrath on a Christ-rejecting world. He also sees that at the same time. And so let's get into chapter 5 here. He's been pronouncing judgment. And so in chapter 5, he's going to use a parable in the form of a song. And we've talked about how there's so many literary devices that Isaiah uses here. And apparently he's also a singer. Chapter 5. Now let me sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved regarding his vineyard. I love that, to my well-beloved. But we're going to remove any question about what this parable is about. If you look down to verse 7, he's going to explain, you know, that it says, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant branch. That's who we're talking about, okay, when you're talking about this vineyard. So with that in mind, he says, my well-beloved is a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of slow down for this first part of chapter 5, and then we're going to speed up. But we already know this is Israel, it's Judah, and he planted them in a fruitful place. He planted them in Canaan, the land of milk and honey, right? Remember, I'm going to bring it to the land of milk and honey. Well, we kind of say that and like, well, what does that mean? The place of milk and honey. What's needed to get milk? Cattle, yes, cattle, cows, goats. You're sure you could have goats too. But how are goats and cows and cattle and herds, how are they supported? By green grass, by lots of fertile plants. And so maybe I should just skip the rhetorical questions at this point. You're warming up. Give us a minute. And so the land of milk and honey was going to be fertile enough to support cattle and crops and all that. Well, if there's honey, then that means there's what? Bees. Oh, you guys are warming up. If there's bees, then there's flowers. You guys are really warming up. Now, if there's flowers, that means it's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? Flowers are gorgeous. Flowers are beautiful. Flowers are God's way of decorating the outside, right? He just does an amazing job. And so when they say the land of milk and honey, what's being said is this place is beautiful and bountiful. I mean, it's got everything that you would want. And God says, I planted you in this place that was full of potential. Verse 2, this is what it says about the vineyard, the vine dresser. It says he dug it up and cleared out its stones. And we could say, just in passing, that's the Philistines, that's the people that were in the place before Israel came, the stones. And he says he planted it with the choicest vine. Again, this is Israel. That's who we were talking about. He built a tower in its midst. He protected them, gave them direction. He did this through prophets and priests, and later on he did it through kings, through David, and certainly he set up a structure there for them to be protected. And it says he also made a wine press in it. Everything was as it should be. Here's this caring vine dresser. He's taking initiative. He's got this good plot of land. The plot is perfect. It's great. He made the soil just right, removed the stones, all of that. He handpicked the vine that he wanted for this perfect soil. He defended it with a watchtower, and then it says he has the wine press in place. He's ready to receive the fruit of his labor. He's got everything ready, and so it goes on and says he expected to bring forth good grapes. Hey, he's got potential. There's expectation there. But it brought forth wild grapes. The vine dresser, the Lord, had every reason to expect that this vineyard was going to produce good grapes. That was his expectation. And he's done everything to make sure and provide for. They have the greatest opportunity. They had the greatest opportunity to be successful, but it said instead they're wild, or maybe more literally, they're stinking. What was produced, get this, what was produced was worse than not having grapes at all. No grapes is better than grapes that are stinking and toxic and putrid, things that make you want to gag. And so it was worse than being unfruitful. It was bad fruit. Verse 3, and now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, please, between me and my vineyard. What more could have I done to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? The Lord says, you tell me, what else could have I done? I have set everything in order for you to be in a fruitful relationship with me. What could have I done? Who's to blame? The vine dresser or the vineyard itself? Verse 5, and now please let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. Because if there's bad fruit, this is what I'm going to do. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, and break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. Do you notice here, he's simply not going to stop protecting it. He's going to withdraw his hand. He's not actively doing these things. I'll just take away its hedge, and it will be burned, and break down its wall, and it will be trampled. He's like, I'm not going to throw more, to put it in human terms maybe, I'm not going to throw more energy, good energy, into something that's just a bad energy sucker, that I'm not going to meet that bad energy with good energy. And so he says, I will lay it to waste. It shall not be pruned or dug. He's just going to hold his hand from it. But there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds, and that they rain no rain on it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looked for justice, but behold oppression. For righteousness, but behold a cry for help. Now, in the English, this is what the Lord is looking for. Here's what he found. It is powerful enough that way, but you've got to check this out. We've talked about this kind of through our last couple studies in Isaiah, is that he uses such poetic language in such a powerful way. And so the third line in verse 7, the word for justice is mipat, mipat, and the word for oppression is mizpah. And so in the Hebrew, if you can just kind of picture what that would sound like, I mean, it's powerful enough, the statement that it's making, but it says, he looked for mizpat, but behold, mizpah. And it goes on in the next line, for sedekwa in the Hebrew, but behold, seekwa. And so there's this similar sounding words that he's using. And so not only is just the message of it powerful, how he's saying it would just ring in their ears. And so he says, everything was set up for Israel and Judah to be successful, to bear good fruit. I looked for good fruit. I found poisonous, toxic, disease fruit. And so instead of receiving this ripe fruit, what that's telling me is that the nation is ripe for judgment. And so he says, I'm going to allow it to be overgrown. I'm going to quit pulling the weeds, he said. It's going to have briars coming up, and I'm not going to water it anymore. And here's what's interesting is that's exactly what is going to happen. The end of verse 5 says, take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, and break down its wall, and it shall be trampled on. And when Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem, it was burned, it was trampled down, and it was laid to waste. Now, Isaiah delivers 6 woes. And as Spurgeon, who always has such a great quote, as Spurgeon said, God's woes are better than the devil's welcomes. I'm going to go through these pretty quick here. But first woe, and if you have headings in your Bible, they might be listed all sorts of different things. But the first woe is to those who live for their possessions. Verse 8, woe to those who join house to house. He's not talking about, two people from broken marriages or something joining each other. It's like, I'm going to build this house and add another house and another house and another house. They add field to field till there's no place where they might dwell alone in the midst of the land. Everything's going to be mine. I'm going to be in the middle. Verse 9, in my hearing, the Lord of hosts said, it says like, I just overheard the Lord saying this. Truly, many houses shall be desolate, great and beautiful ones, without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield one bath. I think a bath is like 6 gallons. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly. But he says, 10 acres of vineyard. You can picture a 10-acre field. Our property all the way back there is on 5 acres, twice that size. It's going to produce 6 gallons of grape juice. It's not going to produce what it should for you. And a homer of seed shall yield 1 ephah. And so he says, yeah, living for more, gathering more. It's not going to matter who gets in the way. I'm just going to do this. I'm at house to house, field to field. He says, you're not going to be satisfied. That big old house is going to be empty. It's going to be vacant. Second woe, woe to those who live for the moment. Woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they may follow intoxicating drink, who continue until night, till wine inflames them. The harp and the strings, the tambourine and the flute and wine are in their feast, but they do not regard the work of the Lord, nor consider the operation of his hands. They're blinded by this desire to live for the right now, for the moment. Therefore, verse 16, my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. Their not honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. Therefore, Sheol has enlarged, or death has enlarged itself and opened its mouth beyond measure. Their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he who is jubilant shall descend into it. People shall be brought down. Each man shall be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty shall be humbled. But the Lord of hosts shall be exalted in judgment, and God who is holy shall be hallowed in righteousness. Then the lambs shall feed in their pasture, and in the waste places of the fat ones strangers shall eat. Saying in the fast lane, it's not going to satisfy you. In the long run, this life of intoxication and abuse is just going to bring you into more captivity. And that's the thing. He's talking about drink and all of this, and we can certainly add drugs to all that. It promises freedom, but what it brings us is more bondage. It sells us a bill of goods, and that's the enemy's greatest trick. But it's the Lord alone that provides true freedom. So, woe to those who live for a life that destroys them. Number 3, woe to those who sin openly. Verse 18, woe to those who draw iniquity with cords of vanity and sin as with a cart rope. The picture is kind of like this guy hauling around a wagon full of sin. And he's pulling that sin with like lying and deceit. Whatever I can get to get my sin, I'm going to have my sin. And everywhere I go, I'm taking my sin with me. And it's like, so it's more than I can bear. I'm just dragging it with me. Verse 19, they say, let him make speed and hasten his work. Capital H is let him hasten his work that we may see it. And let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw near and come, that we may know it. They're basically mocking God. Let the Lord come and do something. This is the life I'm living. Yeah, I'm taking sin with me. And there's 3 options here on why people who choose this for their life, why that is. And one, they think that God can't do anything about the sin in their life. That's one option. He's impotent to do anything about it. Secondly, they think, well, he just won't do anything about it. He just doesn't care. He's just, whatever, the grand watchmaker, he wound up the world and just let it go and doesn't care. Or the third option is they actually think that God is approving of their lifestyle, but they're just mocking God. And Isaiah says, woe to you. Man, you're mocking God with your life. Woe to you. Fourth, woe to those who confuse good and evil. It says, woe to you, verse 20, who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Can you get a verse that describes the culture that we live in more right now? He's saying people are morally and ethically backwards. They're confused. And here's what it's saying is that we talked about how the grapes that were produced were worse than no grapes, because you can't taste a bad grape. This is worse than blindness. Someone who's like completely, totally blind, they can't tell the difference between light and dark. But here, they're presenting darkness as light. It's worse than being blind. It's worse than someone with no taste buds who can't tell something sweet or bitter. They're presenting something bitter as sweet. And they reject right like it's wrong, and then they promote wickedness like it's righteousness. It's completely backwards. And again, it seems to me to so be describing the time and the culture that we live in. And in part of that, I take heart, because there's a portion of us that thinks, well, in the 50s, if like my parents were kids or my grandparents were kids or whatever, couldn't imagine the world that we live in now. And that's true, but it's always been around. There's nothing new under the sun. And so it was that way thousands of years ago. People were doing the same thing. And so I kind of take heart a little bit that it's not, but on the other side is like, man, the Lord's got to do something. I mean, this is a woe. This is a warning of judgment. And it's just so seems to be describing today. And can you imagine the backlash there would be if, a group of us got together and we're like, we're going to put on and petition the city and try to get a permit to put on a pro-heterosexual marriage parade. How much backlash we would have for promoting heterosexuality? Crazy. Yeah. Right? It's called wrong and wrong is called right. And if you don't agree, you're intolerant, right? And not only if you don't agree, you have to not only just agree, you have to celebrate that. Oh. Okay. They lack a compass for truth. Paul Jones, just for recording. Paul Jones, we're in chapter 5, and we're between 20 and 21. Welcome. I love you, man. Okay, so they lack this compass for truth. And again, think of a compass, that you're lost out at sea, you're on this, the abandoned island or whatever, you're just completely isolated. And like, if I could just tell which direction is which, I could find my way to safety. And you find this compass, and it's telling you the opposite way. Instead of like, if I just know where true north is, and it's telling you that true north is south. That's how these people that he's describing are living. They just lack this compass for ethics and morality. And that leads to, in my mind, it leads to the fifth woe. Woe to those who live justifying self. Verse 21. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. Again, doesn't this just apply to where we are? Full of pride, self-seeking. It's right because I said so. I'm the ultimate authority on me. And that settles the matter. Proverbs, and you guys, I think you guys probably know this, that Proverbs says there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof it's death. That seems right. Seems right. I was just talking with one of my kids just this past week, and just talking about how just the process of denying self, And I basically said to this child that at any time we are at a place, a course, where the path is going to diverge, and either direction that we go is painful. But here's the difference. If I take this way, if I choose this way, that I'm going to follow the Spirit, I'm going to deny flesh. Denying flesh is painful. Speaking of children, when you deny flesh, it's painful. It doesn't feel good to say no to things your body wants, that your flesh wants, that your self, your will, your ego wants. That's painful. So that's option one. That's pain number one. But option two is giving into the flesh. And that pain, it's not immediate. This one's immediate. There's pain immediately. The other one is delayed, and it comes with interest. And it's going to hurt more in the long run. And here's the major difference. When I choose and I come to this crossroads and I take denying flesh, that hurts me and me alone immediately. If I choose giving into the flesh, it hurts me later, but it compounds. It resonates beyond me, and it hurts those in my family, my friend groups, all of that. And so we always have this choice, and this is the danger of those, as he's saying here, those who are wise in their own eyes. We just read in James chapter 3 just a few Sundays ago. He said, if you have bitter envy and self-seeking, it's the same idea, in your hearts, he says, don't boast and lie against truth. This wisdom does not ascend from above, but it's earthly, it's sensual, and demonic. Living for self is worldly, it's fleshly, and it's demonic. The three things that we're called to war against as Christians. Okay, sixth, woe to those with displaced value. You can come to better titles than I have on this, but woe to those with displaced values. Verse 22, woe to men mighty at drinking wine. Woe to men valiant for mixing intoxicating drink. What are you good at? Yeah, I'm really good at drinking, man. That's what I do. Gosh. The sad thing is okay, yeah, verse 22 was me for a while. Too many years, all right? Yeah. I'm going to channel 1994 Tad. Hold on. What's up, man? Let's get some beer. Okay. Verse 23. Who justify the wicked for a bribe and take away justice from the righteous man. People are valiant, he's describing here, and mighty for all the wrong reasons. They're valiant and mighty when it comes to giving into the flesh, to giving into their own desires, but they're weak when it comes to justice and equality, things that matter for other people. Therefore, verse 24, as the fire devours the stubble, and the flame consumes the chaff, so their root will be as rottenness, and their blossom will ascend like dust. We can just read through this so quick, and I just encourage you to read ahead, rereads the stuff that we study here on Wednesday nights. But it's how he writes it is so beautiful. The root, the blossom, man, it's from bottom all the way down deep to the foundations, to the fruit, all the way to the very end. The whole thing is just death. Because, and he's going to tell us the reason for the woe, because they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Verse 25, therefore the anger of the Lord is aroused against his people. He has stretched out his hand against them and stricken them, and the hills trembled. Their carcasses were as refuse in the midst of the streets. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. This is not stretched out, we got to picture that picture of Jesus, the blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus with, going like this. It's not stretched out this way. It's stretched out this way. His hand is stretched out still. Verse 26. He will lift up a banner to the nations from afar and will whistle to them from the ends of the earth. Surely they will come with speed, swiftly. It says the Lord is going to signal a foreign nation. Come on over, have your way. Make your way into Jerusalem, make your way into Judah, wipe it out. And when he raises that banner, it's going to be Babylon that answers the call. But as I said at the beginning, it is going to be Babylon, but this also speaks of a greater fulfillment, a final fulfillment, when the armies of, I encourage you to read, if you have not before, Ezekiel 38, 39, when the armies of Gog and Magog come and surround and come around Jerusalem. It speaks of that time as well. Well, that foreign power is coming. And check this out. Sometimes we slow down so much we kind of miss some of the comparison and contrasting that Isaiah is doing. But in contrast to the drunken heroes of verse 22, you picture this guy stumbling around and drunk, falling on his face. No, not these ones he's calling out. Verse 27, not one will be weary or stumble among them. No one will slumber or sleep. Nor will the belt on their loins be loosed, nor the strap of their sandal be broken. They're going to be coming. They're going to be fit, ready. Verse 28, whose arrows are sharp and all their bows bent, ready to unleash. Their horses' hooves will seem like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring will be like a lion. They will roar like young lions. Yes, they will roar and lay hold of the prey. They will carry it away safely, and no one will deliver. In that day they will roar against them like the roaring of the sea. And if one looks to the land, behold, darkness and sorrow, and the light is darkened by the clouds. And he says, this storm is coming. There's no preventing it. I'm calling it. I'm beckoning the nation to come and bring judgment. And he says the darkness and sorrow, it's just this storm is coming. And for those of you who like to jot down notes and cross-reference, maybe you could put down Zephaniah 1, 14 and 15. 1 verses 14 and 15. It's not very often you get to write down Zephaniah, so there you go. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is like holy ground. It is such a unique and just special chapter in Isaiah that as we go through it, I just don't want to muddy it up. It's so amazing. But in Isaiah chapter 6, we have Isaiah's conviction and his cleansing and his calling. His conviction, cleansing, and calling. And again, you could come up with your own ways to names for the outline, but in verses 1 through 4 is the conviction. It's Isaiah sees the Lord. That's Isaiah 1 through 4. Verses 5 through 7, Isaiah sees himself and understands his need for cleansing. So conviction and cleansing. And then in verses 8 through 13, the end of the chapter, is the call. And Isaiah sees his mission. He sees the Lord, he sees himself, he sees his mission. Verse 1. You guys are going to love chapter 6, because I love chapter 6. Therefore, I'm going to make you love it. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Isaiah gets a sneak peek into heaven, and he's just transported up to the throne room. It's very similar to what happened to the Apostle John in Revelation chapter 4, when he's raptured up to the throne room of heaven. But in verse 1, there's a lot of information here in verse 1. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but in verse 1, we are told the time and the reason for this vision that he had. And the time and the reason is the same thing. It's when King Uzziah died. Now, keep a finger here, and if you'd turn to 2 Chronicles 26. We probably don't have time for this, but that's too bad. We're going to look at 2 Chronicles 26. Uzziah was the most powerful king that Judah itself had ever had, right? When it was a united kingdom, towards the end of David's reign and into Solomon's reign, certainly it was powerful. But after the break away, Uzziah had caused Judah to be the most powerful it ever was. The military was powerful economically. It was powerful. And for most of all of his reign, he was one of the good kings. In 2 Kings 15:3, it says this about him. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord. In 2 Chronicles 28, verse 5, it says he sought God in the days of Zechariah, and he had understanding and visions of God, and as long as he sought the Lord made him prosper. Uzziah is quite the guy. He was king longer than any other king before him. But as you remember, Uzziah died a leper in 742 BC because he not only wanted to be king, he wanted to be priest as well. And so I just want to read some of this because it's so great. I love this. 2 Chronicles 26. Now all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. He built Elath and restored it to Judah after the king rested with his fathers. Uzziah was 16 years old, and he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jecoliah of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. He sought God in the days of Zechariah, who had understanding in the visions of God, and as long as he sought the Lord, God made him prosper. Verse 6, now he went out and made war against the Philistines and broke down the wall of Gath, the wall of Jabneh, and the wall of Ashdod, and he built cities around Ashdod and among the Philistines. Man, he just made huge advances. God helped him against the Philistines, against the Arabians who lived in Gur-Baal, and against the Meunites. Also, the Ammonites brought tribute to Uzziah. His fame spread as far as the entrance of Egypt, for he became exceedingly strong. And Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate and the valley gate and at the corner buttress of the wall. Then he fortified them. Verse 10, also he built towers in the desert. He dug many wells, for he had much livestock, both in lowlands and in the plains. He also had farmers and vine dressers in the mountains and in Carmel. And I love this little line, for he loved the soil. I love the soil too. I don't have a garden. I don't even have any grass in my place, but I do love the soil. Verse 11. Moreover, Uzziah had an army of fighting men who went out to war by companies according to the number on their roll as prepared by Jaleel the scribe and Maaseiah the officer under the hand of Hananiah, one of the king's captains. The total number there is a lot. It's so many people. Verse 14, then Uzziah prepared for them, for the entire army, shields, spears, helmets, body armor, bows, and slings to cast stones. Check out, this is one of my favorite parts in the Old Testament. He made devices in Jerusalem invented by skillful men to be on the towers and the corners to shoot arrows and large stones. He made like catapults or trebuchets or something. So his fame spread far and wide, for he was marvelously helped till he became strong. He's like the Tony Stark of Judean kings. Man, he's inventing things to fight and protect with. Verse 16, but when he was strong, his heart was lifted up, as is often the case, to his destruction, for he transgressed against the Lord his God by entering the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. That's the priest's job. So Azariah the priest went in after him, and with him were 80 priests of the Lord, valiant men. They withstood the king Uzziah. Can you imagine that? That's a whole other Bible study. But here's this powerful king who's been so good to the nation, and they have prospered. They have rocked under him. And he comes into there, but they knew, I don't care who this guy is. This is not what he should be doing. And they were valiant. They withstood him. It says, they said to him, it is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the sons of Aaron, who are consecrated to burn incense. Get out of the sanctuary, for you have trespassed. You shall have no honor from the Lord God. Then Uzziah became furious. Like, do you know who you're talking to? And he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was angry with the priest, leprosy broke out on his forehead before the priest of the house of the Lord, beside the incense altar. It's like while he's angry, while he's talking to him. And Azariah, verse 20, the chief priest and all the priests looked at him. And there, on his forehead, he was leprous. So they thrust him out of that place. Indeed, he also hurried to get out because the Lord had struck him. King Uzziah, verse 21, was a leper until the day of his death. He dwelt in an isolated house because he was a leper, for he was cut off from the house of his Lord. And then his son reigned in his place. So that's the backdrop to what we're talking about here in chapter 6. And so the year that King Uzziah died, Judah lost a wise king, a powerful king, one that had helped economically and militarily in every way imaginable. Things were good, and that's who they lost. And Isaiah personally, if you remember this from our introductory study, Isaiah is part of the royal family. You know, he's not in line to be king. That's his cousin. So he not only lost a king that has been king and trusted and just incredible, he also lost a family member. And after 52 years, can you imagine having someone be president that long? 52 years, that's all some people know in their lifetime is one person, and just he's gone. It was at this moment that Isaiah is shown in this dramatic, life-changing way that while the throne in Jerusalem is empty, the King of Kings, the ultimate authority, is still on heaven on his throne. That's what's important here. That's what he sees when Uzziah died. When the powerful one that we thought we could all depend on, when he was gone. When there was no one else, when I was desperate, that's when I saw the Lord high and lifted up, seated on his throne. And in contrast to this earthly king, this good king, earthly king, who desired to not only be king but priest, he sees the only priestly king. And there's no question about who this is. We may read this chapter a little bit later, but John chapter 12, verse 41, you need to have that in your margin written right next to chapter 6, that whole area, all of John chapter 12. But John chapter 12, 41 says this: these things Isaiah said when he saw his glory and spoke of him. John, in John 12 there, is quoting Isaiah and says, Isaiah said these things because he saw Jesus' glory. He's attributing this to Jesus. Isaiah sees Jesus high and lifted up, exalted above kings and kingdoms and nations. And, later in the book, when we get to the second portion of Isaiah and we get to the servant aspect of who Jesus is, in chapter 53, it says about Jesus that in his first coming, when he's incarnate, that he has no form or comeliness, that when we see him, that we should desire him. There was nothing outwardly about Jesus that was special, but that's not the case right now. On the throne, the train of his robe, it says, filled the temple. Now, I want you to listen up, because this is one of those instances where it's fascinating to me, so it has to be fascinating to you, or I'll be disappointed in you. Okay. The Hebrew word that is translated train here is not, well, you'll notice that robe is what? The word robe is in, anyone? It's in italics, yes, which means it's not really there, right? Okay. But the word that's translated train is not translated that way anywhere else in Scripture. Almost always it's translated hem. His hem filled the temple. Now here's what's important. Here's what I want you guys to listen up, pay attention if you've never been through a study where we've talked about this. The hem of the garment is an important piece of Jewish tradition. It was the emblem of rank and authority in Israel. It's very, very similar to how we would see, an officer or a pilot or something, and they'd have, the bars on, or the stripes on their sleeve or whatever. To have your hem signified, what was in your hem signified your strength, your power, your authority, your title, who you were. And it's just to tie some things together. Joseph, we know, way back in Genesis, Joseph received a coat of many colors, and it very well may be that those colors were in the hem. There was something different. There was something special about Joseph, so much so that his brothers wanted to, off him. It's not just because he got a rainbow coat, Who would kill their brother, attempt to kill their brother? He's got a pretty jacket. No, nobody. Nobody's going to do that. And we understand the importance of the hem. It makes so many different things pull together and make sense. When we understand that the hem is a symbol of power and authority, and then we read through and we see Saul, he's going into this cave to go to the bathroom, right? Oh, David's in there. This is going to be close. What did David do? He cut off the hem. Here's the symbol of Saul's authority. Gone. And remember later he repented. He's like, I shouldn't have done that. That was the Lord's anointed. I shouldn't have done that. And we think we just read through it. Well, okay, he can get a new jacket, He doesn't. But no, this was the Lord's anointed, and he cut that off. He symbolized, I don't like that authority. I don't want that authority. And it helps make that make sense. And there's those who would have you believe, if you read through the book of Ruth and you get to chapter 3, and it says that Ruth went to the threshing room floor, and it says she uncovered the feet of Boaz. And there's those who would say, oh, she's making sexual advances on Boaz. That's hogwash. That's garbage. Because what does it say? It says she uncovered his feet, and when he woke up, he's like, whoa, wait, what's going on? What are you doing? And she said, in Ruth chapter 3, take your maidservant under your, it says wing in the New King James Version, but it's the same word, and it's hem. Take your maidservant under your hem, for you are a close relative. And she invokes this kinsman redeemer principle on him. So it's very important throughout the Old Testament, but let's not stop there. This idea of the hem, these Jewish people didn't stop being Jewish when they went from the Old Testament to the New Testament. If you remember that the woman that had the issue with blood for 12 years, doctors couldn't fix it. The religious leaders couldn't do it. But she pressed through the crowd, and she's like, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, then I'll be made well. It's not like, oh, he's got a really fancy jacket. No, I'm trusting in his authority, his position, who he is. That's what I'm grabbing hold of. And so Isaiah isn't going to have to push through a crowd to see the incarnate Lord. He's getting a glimpse of Jesus Christ in all his glory and authority. Colossians 1 verse 15 says that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. Hebrews 1:3 says that he is the express image of God. And so this is who Isaiah is seeing. He is seeing King Jesus on the throne. And he's realizing at the same time that he's always been on the throne. It wasn't Uzziah. Any trust I placed it in Uzziah was misplaced trust. It's not Uzziah on the throne. It was never Obama on the throne. It's not Trump on the throne. It's not Republicans in power. It's not Democrats in power. It's not a new Supreme Court nominee that got confirmed. None of that. Nations and leaders come and go, but the Lord is still on the throne, and his authority still fills the temple. Verse 2, above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. Now, seraphim, it's kind of interesting. This is the only place in the Bible, actually, where believe it or not, that it mentions seraphim. And seraphim literally means fiery one or burning one. But in other passages in the Bible where it talks about the throne of God, and certainly in Revelation as well, we read about cherubim, not seraphim, but cherubim, or the living creatures. And some believe that they're different, that cherubim and seraphim are different things. But most scholars believe that this is just 2 titles for the same beings. They both have these 6 wings, and with 2, it says one pair, they cover their face, and we're not even worthy to look at the one who sits on the throne. And with another, they cover their feet in humility. That's kind of an Eastern thing to do, that to not show your feet. And then with the last pair, they fly. David Guzik points out, the seraphim used 4 of their wings to express their humility, and used 2 of their wings to express their willingness and ability to serve God. I like that. So Isaiah sees the throne authority of God. He sees the seraphim, verse 2. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Now, we talked about just this past Sunday, in our long, lengthy study, all the way through 2 verses in 1 Corinthians 1, we talked about the word holy. And the word holy, whether it's in Hebrew or Greek, it doesn't matter. The idea is otherness, apartness, transcendent, above, just uncategorically, just different. Now, here, these seraphims are crying out, just like responding back to each other, holy, holy, holy. You know, in many languages, in English too, to a point, the more you repeat something, it means to a greater degree, right? And in English, we do that to a point. I could say, that Jordan is a very, very handsome man, which is like way more than very handsome. He's very, very handsome, I know when I was in Haiti. Oh, not this Jordan. I'm sorry. No, I'm just joking, bro. I'm joking. When I was in Haiti, I know enough Creole to get around, but I have people come up to me and like, "Vous parlez Creole?" Like, you speak Creole, and I'd say back, "Me parle piti Creole." That's literally how I do it, and that's like the way you speak. I speak very little Creole. I want to, no expectations here, and so, but the Lord here is holy, holy, holy. He's set apart, and this is so interesting to me, and we just doing a study on holiness and what it means and how that relates to God would be so valuable and worth your time if you ever wanted to dig into it. But we categorize and classify everything. There's not one thing in creation that we don't classify and categorize. That tree is a fir. That fish is a trout. The Milky Way is a galaxy. We have a category for all these things. Fido is a golden retriever. Well, a golden retriever is a dog. Well, the dog is a mammal. A mammal is a species. We just keep classifying, but God doesn't have a category. He doesn't fit in. He's not part of the created universe. He's not one of something. He's completely other. That's what it means to be holy. It's just outside of all that. And so it's like the backdrop for God, and all his other attributes are painted on that canvas. And so when we talk about he is his love His love is holy. It's completely other. It's completely separate from anything else there is. It's transcendent. His strength, his power, his character, all of it is just other. Every attribute that you think of is just set apart from anything that we know. And there's nothing or no one that we can compare the Lord to. The minute that we say, well, the Lord is like, whatever we put next doesn't matter. Because the moment that we put anything at the end of that sentence, it becomes blasphemous to God. Because he's not like anything. He's holy. He's other. He's set apart. Can't categorize him like that. And it's only because that's who he is, right? And it's only because we are made in the image of God. And that God transcended and incarnated human flesh. That's the only reason that we can have a relationship with him, because he is so other. But it's because we're made in the image of God that we can actually have relationship with him. And so he sees the Lord has a throne authority, that he's holy, holy, holy. He's set apart. And not only is the whole earth filled with his glory, all heaven is filled with his worship. Verse 4, the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out. And man, you want to get ready for heaven, start worshiping now, because that is going to be what we're doing. And the house was filled with smoke. Now the smoke is not incense. He's getting a glimpse that the Lord is a consuming fire. It's a sign of his power and authority. And again, if you want to jot down some cross references, you could put down Revelation 15, verses 5 through 8. Describe the scene when the chorus of believers singing this song, and then it's just smoke just filled the place. It could also, what's really interesting is Psalm 18, verses 7 through 15 are all just speak with the same terminology and language. Smoke, cloud just signified the Lord's presence. And so Isaiah, again, we're reading this. He's experiencing this. This is just, it's so real to him. He's getting an understanding in a far greater way than us reading it about the holiness of God, just the complete otherness of who he is and just how transcendent he is. And so this same Isaiah who just got done pronouncing 6 woes against others now pronounces a 7th one on himself. So I said, woe is me, for I am undone. Oh, now that I understand the Lord's holiness, what that really means, now that I really see him high and lifted up, I see his authority and his power. They can cry out, holy, 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 but he's not able to do that right now. Because as we're going to see, he's a man of unclean lips. But what he can say is, woe is me, for I am undone. Have you ever noticed that we like to compare ourselves with other people to gain a sense of self-worth? We all do it. I read some interesting studies this week. Check this out. One study showed that 94% of professors, college professors, rated themselves above average compared to their peers. Almost 100% of them thought they were better than the next guy. 94%. In another study, you have to pay attention to this one, 32% of employees, so a third of employees, said they performed better than 19 out of or 20 of their colleagues. When it comes to driving, this is a classic. Anywhere between 65 and 84% believe they're excellent drivers. We think that person's an average driver. I've driven with them. I'm pretty good. I don't know about excellent, maybe, yeah. Well, you said it. You brought it up. So probably am excellent, When Isaiah, it's the wrong standard, right, to compare ourselves to someone else that way. It's the wrong standard. But when Isaiah when we consider God And the incredible gulf between who he is and who we are, it leaves the best of us undone. It's similar to when Jesus, you remember with the disciples, and they'd been out there fishing. Well, they called it fishing. They were out there floating in a boat with nets in the water. And Jesus said, launch out into the deep, and then throw your nets. And they balked a little bit, but went. And then they pulled up so much fish that it almost sunk 2 boats. And Peter cried out, says, depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. This is exactly what is, the same thing is happening to that happened to Peter that's happening to Isaiah. I'm exposed, and I know in light of who you are, who I am, and I have no right to be here. I'm not worthy. I feel disgusted about who I am because of how great you are. Now, some would say, I don't necessarily agree with this, that some would say that this is when Isaiah was converted. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. It certainly could be. It could be that this is just chronologically not in order with the rest of Isaiah. But regardless, I don't know that it makes a difference. This was Isaiah's experience, and this experience would leave a mark on someone's life. This would change a person. And so he is realizing now that he is unsendable because he understands his own weakness and emptiness, and he's just undone. Spurgeon, again, another Spurgeon said this, God will never do anything with us until he has first of all undone us. So Isaiah says, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. People can get real focused on the lips. Okay, he's a man of unclean lips, the people of unclean lips. But it's more than that, because it's out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. He understands this is a heart issue. This is a deep-seated issue, not only with the people, but I have it in myself. It's in me. And so he's convicted, and he knew that he needed to be cleansed, but he doesn't have the ability. Verse 6, then one of the seraphim flew to me. He just says that like it's nothing, right? The word seraphim means fiery ones, They've got 6 wings. He's flying right at me. Having in his hand, he's got hands too, hands and wings. Having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth with it. Can I just point out something that's real obvious here? This is not what drove Isaiah to be undone. Having a hot coal. Can you just imagine watching you got the charcoal briquettes, and they're just raging in there, and they're just taking a tongs and touching your lips. Can you just, that's one of the most sensitive parts of your body, man. That would undo me. But that's nothing to him compared to seeing who the Lord was. That's how impactful that was compared to this. Not that this wasn't impactful, but he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away and your sin purged. The altar is the place of sacrifice. The seraphim take a coal from the place of sacrifice, touch his lips, and says, your sin, your iniquity, it's gone. It's just symbolic of the fact that Isaiah was made clean, not by anything that he had done, but by a sacrifice that was made. And so he's convicted, he's cleansed, and now called. Verse 8, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I go, and who will go for us? Now, this is so amazing, too. This is just another reason to love chapter 6. The overtones of the triune nature of God are all over in Isaiah, and especially here in chapter 6, because you don't notice it maybe quite so quickly in English, but he's given 3 different titles in chapter 6. He's called Adonai in verse 1. He's called the Lord of hosts in verse 3. And in verse 12, he is called Yahweh. He's got 3 different titles here. The angels are singing their chorus, 3 of 3. holy, holy, holy. There seems to be something there. And here, this is just amazing. The voice of the Lord, singular, the voice of the Lord is saying, whom shall I, singular, send, and who will go for us, plural? Just amazing. Yeah, Trinity. But I love this so much because notice this, that the Lord is at the same time, whom shall I go and who will go for us? At the same time, he's looking for someone to send, and he's looking for someone willing to go. Who can I recruit? And who's going to volunteer? Those aren't two separate things. That's one question for him. Who's willing to be sent? And that's often the case. Not always, but often the one who's willing is the one that is sent. There's times when the willing aren't the ones that are sent, and they go into ministry for the wrong reasons, and it causes lots of pain and heartache. But for the person that sees the Lord high and lifted up, who just continues to exalt the Lord high and lifted up, who's been cleansed by the sacrifice, more often than not, that person is willing and is sent. And we all have this sentness to us. We're all called to proclaim the gospel. The Lord's just waiting for us to be willing. Then I said, here I am, send me. He just responds eagerly. I want to be chosen. This picture of the Lord is like, whom will go for us and who will I send? And Isaiah like, yeah, can you see me? My hand's up over. You ever done that in school? Maybe not. Maybe you're like, don't call on me, you know. Isaiah's like, call on me, I'm right here. He wants to be chosen. He's been cleansed. He's seen the Lord exalted in his life. He's got a view of how holy God is. He's understanding that God's calling in his heart for the nation, and all of those things combined. The Lord isn't going to force him. He's volunteering. He's willing. He wants to go. Send me. I want to go. And this is the proper response for someone that's been touched by the grace of God. Not that they have to serve, but that they want to serve. They get to serve. They're looking for that opportunity. And he said, go. You want to go? Go. And tell this people. Go home. Talk to the people that you're familiar with. Remember the demon-possessed man that Jesus healed by the Sea of Galilee? He was living among the tombs, and it was a sad situation. And after the Lord cleansed him, he said to Jesus, like, can I go with you? You know, I want to get in your boat. I want to go back with you. Can I go with you? And Jesus said, no, I want you to go home. Go tell the people what's been done in your life. That's your first mission field, is go there. Go back to your school for us. Go back home. Go to your family. That's your first mission field. And so he says, go tell this people, tell your people. Keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull, and their ears heavy. Shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return and be healed. I used to go around Facebook. I've seen it a couple times. I see it like 4 or 5 years ago, and I saw it again just recently. But it's this thing where you read it backwards, and it's like, I am nothing, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then you read it backwards, like, I am a child of God. And you can do almost the same thing with what his mission here is. That you can be healed and return, and you understand with your heart, and you hear with your ears, and you see with your eyes. And all that's possible if you just do that. But Isaiah is sent here to his people. He's sent to these calloused, unbelieving, hard-hearted fellow Jews. And they needed what Isaiah has experienced. They need to see the Lord, experience the Lord lifted up in their life. They need to have the coal touch their lips. That they need the sacrifice to atone for them and understand their own deafness and blindness and hard-heartedness. But basically, what the Lord is saying here is, I want you to give them a warning, but they're not going to receive it. That's basically what he's saying. John Trapp, who lived in the 1600s, like the early 1600s, and I love it when those guys from like a couple centuries just get like down and dirty. He said Isaiah was commissioned to preach them to hell. Boom. Wow. Yeah. If they had such a thing in the 1600s, right? Isaiah is to preach and preach and preach so that their guilt is just certain. And it's not that they can't hear what the Lord has to say. It's that they wouldn't hear. It was a voluntary choosing not to hear the message. And so the very message that Isaiah was giving to draw people to God, to come back to God, was actually driving them further away because they were choosing not to hear it. Does that make sense? And so his mission, just to put it in a nutshell, his mission is to call the nation to repentance unsuccessfully. There you go. Have fun with that. Okay. Verse 11, I said, Lord, how long? Lord, how long is this going to be my mission? Do I just do this for like a couple months? And then I'm going to go to people who will respond to your word? How long do you want me to just be coming and warning people of coming judgment, be rejected by them just over and over again? And he answered, Lord, how long? He answered, until the cities are laid waste and without inhabitant. The houses are without a man. The land is utterly desolate. How long do I keep warning these people of coming judgment? Until judgment comes and until there's no one else to preach to. Doesn't that sound kind of cruel? When we just first read it, doesn't that sound kind of cruel? Just preach until there's no one else to preach to. But think about it. This is merciful. It's gracious. God is going to send Isaiah until there's no one left to reject him. If there's one more pair of ears there, I want you to preach to those ears, Isaiah. God went the whole way, every bit of the way. And the Lord, verse 12, has removed men far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. Isaiah would be faithful to this calling for, as we read in 2 Chronicles 26, he'd be faithful to this for 52 years, preaching to hard-hearted people. And, you know, we could look at his ministry, or certainly Jeremiah's gets a lot of attention, and we could say, well, that wasn't very successful. The people never really turned back to God. But it was not, ministry is not successful because you get results, what you think are results, any results, what you classify as results. That doesn't make ministry successful. What makes ministry successful is obeying the calling on your life. If one person doesn't turn around, but you're called to preach and to teach and share and evangelize, but if you're called to go witnessing to everybody at your job, it doesn't matter if not one person accepts. Certainly we want them to, but you're successful because you did it, because you honored what God had called you to do. One more verse. But yet a tenth will be in it, and will return and be for consuming as a terebinth tree or as an oak whose stump remains when it is cut down. So the holy seed shall be its stump. This is Isaiah's light at the end of the tunnel, and it wasn't the train that he thought it was all of this time. It's the hope of Messiah is coming. And so I actually want to have you turn now to John chapter 12. And I do want to read a little bit out of there, but Isaiah was faithful. The Lord was merciful as he promised. And so in this judgment that is sure, he leaves us. He's going to say, I'm going to leave a stump. I'm going to leave a remnant. I'm going to leave a seed here. And I'm going to leave a path for the Messiah to come. But did you notice here, he said, the last line of verse 13, Isaiah chapter 6 says, the holy seed shall be its stump. In order for there to be life from a seed, the fruit's got to die. That's the only way to get life out of a seed. So, John 12, verse 24. Jesus said, most assuredly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. He who loves his life will lose it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, let him follow me. And where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, him my Father will honor. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. Therefore the people who stood by and heard it and said that it had thundered. Others said, an angel has spoken to him. Jesus answered and said, this voice did not come because of me, but for your sake. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all peoples to myself. You know, you guys are probably familiar with this already, but we like to sing songs that say, see the Lord high and lifted up, and think, oh yeah, we're just going to lift up the name of Jesus, lift up Jesus. Lifting up Jesus means he's lifted up from the earth. He's crucified. He's being hung on a tree. And Jesus is saying, this is what's coming. If I'm lifted up from the earth, then I will draw all people to myself. This, he said, signifying, and we know this because in verse 33 it says, signifying by what death he would die. The people answered him, we have heard from the law that Christ remains forever. And how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up and be crucified? Who is this Son of Man? Verse 35, then Jesus said to him, a little while longer the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. He who walks in darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, and you may become sons of light. These things Jesus spoke and departed and was hidden from them. But although, now John adds his commentary, his notes on this whole situation. This is right after Lazarus has come back to life. A lot of amazing things. This is right towards the end. John adds this. Although he had done so many signs or miracles before them, they did not believe in him, that the word of Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled, which he spoke. Lord, who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Well, that's something Isaiah said. We're not that far, but therefore, verse 39, they could not believe because Isaiah said again, and here's what we just read, he has blinded their eyes, hardened their hearts, lest they should see with their eyes, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn so that I should heal them. Verse 41, these things Isaiah said when he saw Jesus' glory, and spoke of him. So, let me leave you with this. Lord has two questions. After Isaiah sees the Lord high and lifted up, exalted, and he's got an understanding of his authority and his holiness and just who he is, it's who will go? Who will go and whom shall I send? And that's a question, for us, I think, as well. Who will I go? But then the question that Isaiah asks, I think we have an answer to as well. Isaiah asked the question. He says, how long, O Lord? And so in light of who Jesus is, so high and lifted up and exalted, all authority, heaven and earth, and the calling that he has on our life, how long, O Lord? I think that we have the exact same answer. And as long as people have ears, that's how long we share. That's being successful to the Great Commission. It's not if you can get thousands of people to give their life to the Lord. That's great. That's the Lord's fruit. Your calling, my calling, much like Isaiah, is to go to your people. Go back to your people and share. Just share and share and share until there's no one or more opportunities to share. And then you're done. And then you can go to heaven someday and hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. Amen? Let's pray.